Hi everyone, good evening and good morning from wherever you guys are joining in. Firstly, for all people in India, happy Independence Day. Glad you guys made time on this extended weekend and joined us, and very excited to host this event. So just to quickly summarize what CTrIBE, CTrIBE is basically a community of construction tech entrepreneurs, investors, and enthusiasts. So we are trying to build an ecosystem for construction technology within India, and this is one of our initiatives to bring some of the experts in the industry and to talk about construction tech in India and adoption and experiences that they have. So today our panel consists of some veterans, and the lead of this is going to be Mr. Bhargav. Mr. Bhargav Dave is a CEO at Visilean and a renowned person in the contact space. So Bhargav, the space is all yours. Please take it away.
Thank you, Chaitanya. And first of all, before I sort of go on to introduce the panelists, I just want to congratulate and thank Chaitanya, Ram, Aditya, and all of you who are doing a wonderful job in running the CTrIBE group. And it's been a fantastic initiative. And, once again, I mean, this is a great sort of a webinar as well. We have, a very sort of varied panel with sort of some amazing personalities in this panel who will, I'm sure, do justice to the topic that we have, which is constructing the future, accelerating the tech adoption in the Indian AEC industry. And as we know, sort of construction tech has been booming since sort of last 5 years or a decade. And at least in the global sort of construction tech scene. And now India is sort of not far behind. It seems that India is even accelerating in so many aspects. And the idea is that how can we actually leverage the knowledge that we have and what can we do? So the panel is sort of designed around that. We have, I'll start with Kalyan. So Kalyan is a veteran of this industry. He does not actually need any introduction, but I'm still going to introduce him. So he has worked practically his career in this sort of construction tech space, process improvement, lean construction, and he is the co-founder of and ex-CEO of Nadi Technologies, which he then went on to sort of sell to Bentley Systems, where he is currently working. And Kalyan has sort of years of experience, decades of experience in this sort of space, especially when it comes to project management and digitalizing sort of this industry. Then we have Vivin. Vivin comes from a very sort of interesting background. A lot of you, I'm sure, would like to hear from him. So he is currently a VC at Zacua Ventures. Previously, he has worked with some amazing sort of firms such as Hilti and so on, and he has experience both sort of in Europe as well as in America and, of course, India. And I'm sure Zacua, and well, I know that Zacua is also sort of interested in sort of working here in India. So it'll be very interesting sort of to hear Vivin's sort of views on this topic. We have Raghu. Raghu has, again, sort of, he comes from a client organization. And again, we want to hear from them because we know that clients are very important to drive this sort of change forward in our industry. And Raghu has experience in both engineering and design, over 2 decades of it. And he's currently leading design in ITC, which is one of the largest sort of conglomerates in India. And he has a very important position there, leading change and leading digitalization. So welcome, Raghu, and thanks for joining us. And last but not the least, we have Vijay Balah. He's also a veteran in this industry, coming from a completely different dimension to all the others. He comes from a sales background. He has experience in the sort of Asia region as well as the Middle East region. He has worked for organizations such as Oracle, A-Site, SmartApp, and currently at Visilean, he's a colleague with me. And Vijay comes with, again, sort of very deep experience in sort of selling construction solutions in the market. And he can also shed light on what we can do to accelerate this sort of a process. So from a completely different perspective, once again. So with that said, we'll sort of set the tone. We're going to spend about 40 minutes now, 45 minutes discussing amongst ourselves before we open the floor to questions and answers. And I want to start with my first question. Just bear with me. So the first part, I just want to introduce that again, this space has seen a lot of activity, a lot of buzz since sort of last 5 years, tremendous amount of excitement, even some M&A activities going on globally. And that's also sort of now translating to India. A lot of VCs are actually moving into this space. And again, a lot of startups appearing in all sort of areas. So with that said, I want to start. The first sort of set of questions are going to be around challenges. What challenges are we facing, especially when it comes to India? And I'm going to start with VB because he has a sort of extensive experience in selling construction sort of enterprise solutions and software. And I just want to sort of hear from him, what are your thoughts on the challenges that we face? And what are the persistent challenges sort of in this construction sector in India, especially when it comes to selling construction tech?
Thanks, Bhargav, and special thanks to Chaitanya, Aditya, and the CTrIBE team for having this session on a day of historic importance, and also for playing a crucial role in facilitating tech adoption. And as I see it, honestly, you guys are already one solution to the title of the webinar today. So we are actually staring at a market, the Indian market, that surprisingly has a huge awareness quotient, as I would say, but a low adoption quotient across all client segments. So let's look at why. There are several reasons, but I would like to address one a very specific reason, challenge that we are facing extensively in this segment, especially last couple of years, and will continue to face over the next few years. Especially in the case of large corporates, because most of the startups keep eyeing at the enterprise level agreement, right? So that's what we are all hunting for. So factors like, let's say, resistance, mindset, they're all known to us, and they continue to remain challenges we are battling and will continue to do so. With the limited time allocated, I think I'll focus on just one major challenge that we face on the ground. And I love to say this because I'm a grounded guy, the action sales happens on the ground. So the P factor is what I will term it, the people factor. And we often tend to ignore the people factor. Now, I'm actually referring to the employee churn at all levels. Now, let's look at the impact it has at a C level. It can be a major disruptor to an enterprise's digital vision, commitment, continuity, and execution. All of these are challenges, and they are all coming from one single element, I would say, is your employee churn. Because today's CFOs, today's CIO or C level is gone tomorrow. And this also ties directly to one major question that was asked on this panel earlier, asking as to what will drive adoption, top down or bottom up. Now, how do we address this? My approach to this is I'm a very strong advocate of a holistic approach. It's very easy said than done. The responsibility of driving adoption is not just lying with the management or the organization at a C level or the digital transformation officer, etc., but also with us as software vendors who are key stakeholders of the entire ecosystem, and maybe people like CTrIBE. Now, how do we achieve this? It's a very tricky thing. Now, I'm sure everyone focuses on simple things like keeping your solutions UI clean, neat, hand-holding, support services, etc. But I think the key here lies in facilitating adoption even before the sale, right? Now, we are all talking probably of adoption after the sale is made. Now, I am saying the other way around. I think you need to entertain or encourage adoption even before the sale. And this is extremely crucial, especially in large enterprises, where you are also facing another challenge of already homegrown, proven or less proven legacy systems people are already comfortable with. So you are looking at an opportunity to one, facilitate adoption with your new solution, new technology, and so on. At the same time, you are kind of uprooting people who are already comfortable with one solution. So unless you drive adoption even before the sale happens, the sale is not going to happen. Sounds very much like a chicken and egg story, and actually it is. So going from a C level, down or going up can only establish a communication. And without being disrespectful to any C level guest on the platform, let's look at the harsh reality. In many corporates, enterprises, we have the C levels at the mercy of project heads, who's directly responsible for the PNL of the project. So your top-down approach is not going to work, right? So having a mandate from that level is not going to suffice or get you a buy-in. So I think your top-down approach can fail miserably. So what is very crucial is, I repeat, and this phrase, I love this phrase, building a buy-in. It's a process at all levels across businesses and process owners. Otherwise,
Maybe you have 10 seconds. 10 seconds left.
yeah. Oh, great. So I call it account management or even political management, and and your purchase order is just a byproduct of this entire approach or management. So people can call it target audience, some calls it customer segmentation, and so on and so forth. So I think largely we need to look at facilitating the adoption even before the sale. So that is through a process and can actually be different to different organizations and startups.
Yeah, I think these are some really amazing points, especially when it comes to people. And we have this sort of very pertinent issue in AEC sector where you have a high employee turnover. People move from sort of one job to another quite sort of frequently. And how do you then drive adoption? And again, you spoke about two things. One is that, and then the other is like, how do you balance between top down and bottom up? And what sort of strategies to take? So that's actually quite interesting. And we'll come back to some of these things in a minute. So I want to jump to Vivin, and especially given you have this sort of a unique background and experience both in EU as well as in US. How do you see India? Do you see India as a completely sort of a different environment, a different market, especially when you take that sort of contact VC background? And sort of a different ecosystem, or do you think we have more in common with the global market when it comes to these sort of adoption challenges, and especially what VB is talking about?
So I don't think of India as one market. I think of India of a couple of distinct markets, because the way some of the urban areas behave in India is very different from how the tier 2 or the rural areas behave in India. For example, if you take some of the largest players in India, like say Shobha and Tata and others, they have more in common with some of the international players than some of the smaller players. Whereas, and also a mid-sized US player probably is more dissimilar to the US, but a large player in US and large player in India would have a lot of commonalities, because the complexity is higher for these projects. The time sensitivity is higher for these projects, and they have the means to access global solutions. So the other day, someone was talking about a solution like OpenSpace. They will still be deployed in some of the large projects in India because they're aware of these solutions and the complexity merits it. So it's very important for us to identify the type of customer when we're going after it. What is different in India is the level of fragmentation. The level of fragmentation is probably much higher than some of the other markets as well, just because the volume and size of India is so large, right? That's the first thing. The second thing that is different is the labor arbitrage, right? The labor costs in India are still much lower than what you'll see in Europe or US. So the willingness to pay for software solutions is not going to be as high as some of these markets, because there you can easily make an argument saying, hey, you save a few hours of work, it makes sense for you to use it. In India, there is this tendency of saying, okay, let's throw people at the problem, right? We have people available, but that's also changing. People availability in the urban areas is not as easy as it used to be, especially when you talk about skilled labor and so on and so forth. So that's changing. The other part which is different in India is the ecosystem is still very nascent. India as a startup landscape used to be mostly B2C, at least say 5 to 7 years back. The B2B landscape is just about starting to take off, which is basically ensuring that you have targeted solutions which are the right kind of quality to be serving these corporates, right? And finally, if I take the other side of things from a funding perspective, the VC ecosystem in India is also nascent. There are no specialists and so on. So one, you have challenges in selling to the customer because of the level of fragmentation, cost of labor, and so on. On the others, you don't really have this early funding that backs you and who really understands the workflow, who's able to understand the type of solution. So it's been traditionally harder to build these kind of startups in India. So kudos to Kalyan, kudos to you for all the early adopters in the space. But it's changing now. It's changing. India will be the largest market by construction volume by 2026. And therefore, there's been a lot of interest in India of late. And I think that will continue to go up. And I see a lot of similar trends as the international markets in India being adopted very soon.
Thank you very much, Vivin. I think that was quite sort of interesting to hear from you and how you actually see the Indian market. I want to go next to Kalyan. And Kalyan, you have seen some of the most challenging days in this space, starting when you actually started before actually the market was even open. I mean, we have to thank you for some of the work you've done even in opening up this market, and you and the others who have actually started, there are some other players too across India, who have actually started, say, about a decade ago or even more. Now, what are your views, especially, in terms of, so one can say you've done more along, oops, sorry, that was Vivin's alarm. So Vivin, you finished earlier. So how about if you can sort of say, talk about your journey a little bit and, from your early days to now, especially, the topic being, how do we accelerate this? Now, what do you see, what can we do now compared to what you had to face all those years ago in terms of accelerating the change of pace, because that's the need of the hour now.
Sure. I think all of you have been very kind to me. So thank you all. Thank you for that. And happy Independence Day also. And thank you again. A shout out to Chaitanya and the CTrIBE team for doing the yeoman's work that they're doing in putting together that ecosystem that Bhargav and Vivin and others talked about. I guess so yeah, I think I mean, early days were challenging. I will probably anecdotally say a couple of things more to kind of talk about the facetious in a more lighter vein, saying how this went from black to gray. But I think I'll try and see how we can address some of the current and perhaps the future thing, right? So when we started in 2008-9 time frame, and we had built a Nokia, we had built a mobile app on a Nokia phone on a Symbian OS, and we took it to site and said we wanted to get data from the site for progress monitoring, and people would laugh their behinds off, saying, A, you're expecting data, aka internet at site, and B, you're expecting all of us to have a phone, right? So, but I guess now, fast forward so many years, and it's like when you go to the site, they probably look for water, electricity, and data as the first things that they set up as part of site setups and things like that, right? But I think a few things helped. So I think for us, what helped is just when we were setting up, the lean construction movement was also sort of coming up, and Bhargav has been around since those early days. Of course, coming in as a foreign speaker then, but now he's kind of much more local and grounded, right? So I think the reason that is important is I've always felt that tech and process kind of go hand in hand, right? So what the lean was trying to do was trying to figure out how all the stakeholders, the owner, operator, the PMC, and the GCs can work together to deliver project efficiently. And our vision was to deliver a tech platform that sort of enabled that, right? So creating better communication, better collaboration, and better controls. So the fact that we could ride along with the lean journey, I'd say, was a significant help in that. And we'd done a lot of lean services in those early days as well. Where it also helped is they did not see us as a technology guy who was bringing technology for technology's sake. They saw us as an industry person who was trying to solve a problem and bring a solution on a technology platform. And the reason that I'd say that thesis probably still holds true, right? I mean, I can tell you, at least we've won one or two deals against what Vijay mentioned, in-house competition, like locally homegrown products, simply because the business users saw us as, Kalyan, we know we can tell you one thing and you will understand the 10 other things that we are not telling you and develop the features and capabilities around that, right? So that alone, the fact that you are a domain person who understands the pain points of the industry and you're trying to solve it and put together a technology solution, I think is still a thesis that will work now. And I think in going forward also, I think you'll need a lot more of that, right? The other thing was, because we were young and foolhardy, if you will, we were very, very flexible on the pricing strategy, right? So we had a solution. We tinkered around with our pricing, user-based pricing, module-based pricing, unlimited user, project-based pricing. And like Vivin said, it's a fragmented market. We tried different pricing strategies for different sectors. I mean, ultimately we gravitated towards something, but I guess that initial flexibility, not only on the tech and adoption side, but also on the feature side helped. But looking forward, I guess, see, now I think the point is, now you don't need to create platforms. I think what people, there's probably enough of an ecosystem, technology ecosystem. I'd say if I were a betting person now, how to plug into the ecosystem a little better and how to create friction-free data exchanges across the existing ecosystem is probably going to get you better place in terms of tech adoption, right? And creating one sort of sticky factor in your delivery. And I'll tell you this, right? So we built NPulse as a technology solution for project controls. And, a few years down the line, we had to integrate that to SAP as an ERP system. Once we integrated that to SAP, and once it got tied to the fact that data, our field data was effectively going to go into billing, then the stickiness of the solution went up significantly, and adoption challenges almost ironically came down. The solution was no longer difficult to use, slow to use, hard to use, because I was getting paid from data that came off the solution. I'm not saying that's necessarily the one. You can come up with your own, in your own ecosystem that you're developing, your own tech platform that you're developing, find that one or two sticky factors. And that sticky factor, I think, will go a long way in help you develop adoption within and across, right? The other one that I mean, we took advantage of was, remember, so this was, NPulse was first launched in 2014 when the current government was kind of gung-ho about made in India. So we used to have a tagline saying made in India, made for the world, right? So we kind of rode the made in India wave a little bit from its early days. And I don't mean that in a bad way. So what I'm trying to say is, I think if you've developed a solution for this ecosystem, I'd almost venture, and Bhargav can probably, agree or disagree with me on this. It's probably easier to plug into the other ecosystems a little easier. And our own technology solutions get adopted better if you have not only an Indian marketplace for it, but also a Middle Eastern or a Southeast Asian or even a European marketplace for it. So if they know that some of the big players in Europe and Middle East are using it, then getting adoption in India becomes a little easier, right? The last thing I touch upon is, Vijay talked about the bottom-up thing, right? So a lot of things, what we did was we tried to plug into the academic ecosystem and see if our solution could be almost given away free. I mean, Autodesk almost pioneered this by saying they gave away AutoCAD free to the student community. And that's how they created almost educated or knowledgeable users that then came into the, it's a long play, but it creates that necessary adoption, right? I know Bhargav will talk a lot more about adoption later, but I guess those are my early thoughts on this, Bhargav.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And as usual, very useful, especially to the community we're talking to now. And we'll continue the conversation. So, Vivin, you spoke about like the sort of the strategy in terms of, how does it compare with America or to US to then India and so on. What do you think about like the startup journey? What sort of, from where you land your first customer to getting an enterprise deal, and especially like you mentioned in a nascent market like ours. Kalyan already sort of spoke about some of the challenges there and his experiences in opening up. But what are your thoughts, especially coming from US, where you have sort of played an important role in the context space as a VC as you are playing now? What do you think about India from that point of view?
So in India, I think what's really important is having a solution which is customized uh, to the local market, right? Because the workflows in India are not exactly the same as some international markets. There are nuances that you need to be mindful of. The second thing that's very important is understanding what is the customer segment you're addressing, because your go-to-market will look different, your product will look different based on which segment you're targeting, or what is the size of customer you're targeting, sometimes even geographies you're looking at, right? For example, infrastructure is going to be different from commercial, is going to be different from residential. So being laser focused on who you're developing your product for is very, very important, because that has implications down the line. And then making sure that you're adding value to the customer that you're selling immediately is important, because it's more important to add value to the small niche of customers that you're selling to at this point, rather than to add a little bit of value to a wide set of customers. So you would rather go deeper than broader, because the customer who's paying you cares about the value that they get. They don't care about the value that 10 different people get, because you can't really sum up that value and charge them for that, right? And then get usage in your platform, right? Whether it's through pilots or freemium, like Vijay said, right? To get adoption even before you start selling, because that's how people get used to your software. And that is key to ramping this up. Uh, the one thing I would say when it goes to going from pilot to enterprise is you need to understand the culture of the organization. Some organizations work top down, some work bottom up. So, some have complete independence to their projects, and their top down is completely useless, right? But some have much more structured processes where you actually won't get a software deployed without approvals from the central areas. And depending on the kind of software, they might ask you to go through SOC 2 compliance, or they might ask you to have pen tests, they might ask you to have IT verification, and so on and so forth, right? So understanding who you're selling to is very, very important. And also sometimes we always go to the largest players. That might not be the best approach all the time. The mid-sized players, you get access to the owner, and they might move much, much faster than the largest players out there. Again, you can't paint everybody in the same brush. Organizations behave differently, but knowing the one reason why someone is using your product is very important. Because if you don't know what is the reason they're deploying it, then you're not able to build on that solution and build that differentiation. And people should be very clear about why your product is being used in the organization at that point in time. I think if you get all of this in place, then your products start getting entrenched. So for me, the journey starts with the product initially, starting with early go-to-market. Then you have to think about your team and organization in terms of, okay, how are you setting it up? Do you have the right support system in place? Do you have the right customer service in place? So you need to start thinking about all of these aspects, and then eventually you start going much faster and raise funding and so on and so forth.
That was as good as gold, Vivin, when it comes to advice to, young startups. Seriously, that was very useful, especially, some of the points you made. I was like, why are you giving all these secrets away? I'm just kidding. You know, given, and I fully agree, actually. Can't agree more about, we all gravitate towards addressing the largest sort of player in the market, and hey, let's go there. But sometimes you learn more, and maybe the journey is much faster with the mid-size segment, because there is faster decision making there. So fantastic sort of feedback there. Raghu, we're gonna come back to you. Sorry, we I guess we lost you in the middle there, but we have a very important question for you. Raghu, you there, right?
No, he's having some issue, I think.
We've
Bhargav,
lost Raghu. Okay. we're gonna continue then, at least, and hopefully we'll get Raghu back in the system. So that sort of I had some sort of questions stored for Raghu. I'm gonna go to Kalyan now. And Kalyan, this actually comes up. I mean, we've touched upon this a little bit in your previous sort of answer, but this is something very unique to us in India, especially given that we are practically sort of the IT playground for the entire world. We have tremendous amount of capacity when it comes to development, and also because quite a lot of large players. I should not sort of. I'm not naming anybody here, okay, but a lot of large players have neglected this market for various reasons, because it was so price sensitive and so on. And as a result, most organizations, whether they are medium or large, or small sometimes, they've gravitated towards sort of developing their own solutions, in-house solutions. And that tends to, and they're always sort of, you mentioned they're evaluating you against, cheap labor, but they're also sometimes evaluating against, programming capacity that's available to them, whether in-house or away from, as an outsourcing unit. How do you fight that sort of a mindset? How do you sell in an environment where you sort of constantly evaluated against that?
So, I mean, so things we used to tell them is, listen, you can hire a programmer and develop a mobile app. You can pay, it'll take you probably a couple of months and you can get exactly what you want. You can have it customized to the heel of how you want. But remember that the underlying OS of the mobile app will change. The phone versions will change. Not all your users will have the same phone. The middleware will change. The database versions will change. Windows will change. So as your underlying ecosystem changes, somebody is going to have to maintain that code. And code maintenance, continuing to develop and deliver features and enhancements as users evolve, projects change, organizations evolve, is going to be the biggest challenge. And people always think about software as that initial upfront cost, and that that long tail of maintenance is completely ignored. So you educate the decision makers of that, and that significantly tips in the favor of what you want. That's almost point number one. Point number two is, yes, you can develop an app or a solution that is completely tailored to the hilt to your business, but that's your business. Whereas what we bring to the table is an industry best in class, best of breed solution to a problem, which means we are bringing the knowledge, the experience of others in the market to you as well. So it helps you also learn and evolve your process through our experience, our expertise, our knowledge, and our technology, right? So that's a significant another benefit that you get by going with what I call as a COTS solution, right? So that's, I mean, that's it. Sometimes I know it's seen as a bad word, but I think that's the way we should go with it, right? I mean, so that's the thing, right? So because while you are competing with your in-house team for tech, what you're really competing with your end users is the reliability and speed and performance of things like WhatsApp or your Excel or whatever it is, right? So if you cannot, your in-house team cannot deliver that level of reliability, speed, and performance, it'll fall apart. Right. I mean, I can tell you examples. So again, we said we'll not name names. So the large organizations who have tried to develop, their own in-house ERP systems and all that stuff. They'd come to us and say, Kalyan, our ERP team will take months to develop this. Can you please give me this, right? And you become there, because when it becomes business critical operational stuff, some level of nimbleness is required. And I think we bring that nimbleness to the table as well. And the last thing I'd say is the in-house tech team has no pressure, because their jobs are there, right? So they don't have any pressure to continuously improve and do. And I don't mean this in a bad way, right? So they're doing things in a. And for us, whereas whether it's a young startup or even a mature technology firm, survival becomes, so this is your bread and butter. So you need to keep constantly evolving with the customer, with the market, with the ecosystem. And I think all these factors, when you put together, I think buying technology is going to always be a cheaper ROI compared to building technology, right? I think this is I mean, we've done some of these and shown this to customers as well, right? So Raghu is back, I think.
Who's back?
Raghu, can
Yeah.
you
And
at least
yeah,
you can
thanks.
wave your thumb, so at least we know you're visible, but you can say hello
Sure.
and we can confirm your audio as well. And I'm sure as an owner operator, he'll have a point of view on this.
So
Yeah,
thanks,
so
Kalyan, for that. And Raghu, welcome back. We're glad you could rejoin us. I'll go back to the original question because to me it's quite important. So I'll just give you a quick background to what I asked. Clients have been very important to this ecosystem, whether globally or now in India. I've seen personally like how clients, large clients can actually accelerate tech adoption. Whether they are public sector clients or private sector clients. I've seen personally like the likes of National Highways, both in Finland, in England, Network Rail, BAA, and in US, many other sort of examples like Sutter Health in the private sector. They have tremendously accelerated tech adoption and actually given birth to some of the solutions in the process as well. I've seen those sort of case studies firsthand. I want to hear your views coming from a large sort of a client in India. What sort of strategies you're adopting in terms of accelerate this sort of a change within your own sort of organization? So can you please share some ideas there? Thanks, Raghu.
okay, great. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk. Coming from a client like ITC, which is not necessarily into the construction space, we are more like owners. We do a lot of internal infrastructure development. So for us, at a parent level organization, digital initiatives in every division, no matter what area or function they are, the digital initiatives are a priority. Sustainability is a priority. So how does digitization help us meet these goals was some of the thought process that we went through in the initial days. So for us, when we started this journey a few years back, we wanted to get into uh, moving away from the traditional paper-based project to more digitized projects. When we explored the market back 4 or 5 years back, we realized that the Indian ecosystem itself was not really developed, meaning the architects and the consultants or the vendors or sub-vendors were not really up to speed in terms of the digital tools. They were not even ready. They were not even BIM enabled. So when I say BIM, it's like 3D modeling of structures. So when we encountered a space that was so scattered and there was nobody willing to help us in our journey, then we realized the only way for us to move forward is we help and train our own ecosystem. So we started identifying digital tools that could help us move towards a goal of a digital adoption in projects. So we and later on, to meet these goals, we started setting the expectations. I mean, we identified only those consultants who are digitally enabled. We started we started upgrading our contracts to a point where we will work only if you are in a certain ability to do projects digitally. And we spent a lot of time and effort and resources in upgrading and training our consultants, our vendors, sub-vendors, everyone onto the digitized way of delivery of projects. So uh, for a owner who has a certain target to meet in terms of doing projects more efficiently, we identified the technologies in different phases of the project, and we did a lot of POCs. We did the first few years were just about POCs, proof of concepts. We would pick a technology, we would run it through a certain team and get the feedbacks to see how it was being how it is useful for us. If it is useful to us, then we will push it for slightly 1 or 2 projects, getting on board and understanding this. And we had to not only build our own resources to understand how to do projects digitally, but also identify the technology that can be seamlessly integrated into the way the projects are done. And currently, I would also say that one of the major challenges we face in the initial time, and even today that we face, is there is not one tool that can go from your concept stage to the end of the project delivery. So there are a lot of fragmented digital tools that we have to adopt and kind of interlink them. So the interoperability of these tools also becomes a challenging part for us. So how do we take data from one software or one tool to another tool? So I mean, for us, I would say that we ended up developing, since there was no real study in the market, or there's no see a project takes n number of years, like 2-3 years to complete. So we have to see the impact of a digital initiative. We have to wait out the project and then go back and study whether that whole initiative that we took was worth it. So to do that, we developed our own, like I said, a strategy of implementation. That's what we called it. We identify an idea, we ideate the idea for a few times, then we push it to another, push it up a notch into the POC stage. Then from POC stage, it goes to a POC +1 project stage. Then it goes for a organization level adoption of tools. So we had to literally do a lot of self-study and self-discovery on how the digital tools could be adopted. And as in the last few years that we have been in this space, we have understood the technologies better. And now we are in a space where we feel that our projects are pretty well advanced into cloud-based way of doing projects. So the discovery phase and the adoption phase has been really challenging for us in the last few years. So I guess that should answer the question, I guess.
Thanks. Yeah, no, that's very, very interesting. I picked up some of the key points I'll summarize later, but very important points you mentioned, especially related to supply chain and the patience that you need in building out such sort of a program. Finally, because we're sort of running out of time now, I just want to conclude quickly. A couple of questions left. I'm going to change the question a little bit, given what has been already discussed. I want to say, considering you come from the sort of the enterprise sales space, which is what construction is practically in most sort of senses, how do you sort of compress this GTM? Our biggest challenge is the long sales cycles. Have you experienced, or have you actually built strategies in shortening these sales cycles, or do you sort of see any way we can influence the industry to actually shorten these? Because that seems to be one of the biggest bottlenecks in scaling. I want to talk about scaling as the final sort of piece, especially when I hear from the likes of Vivin, Kalyan, and Raghu as well on that. So any thoughts, Vivi, on that?
Yeah, from a very practical perspective, I think one should look at getting a step into the door rather than selling a complete end-to-end. I'm assuming that your solution handles end-to-end solution. So not every organization is going to be kind of either replacing a end-to-end solution that they already have, or looking at something afresh. So that's going to be a tough strategy. So one strategy could be identifying a gap. Let's assume that somebody has got already a existing system, a homegrown or a different system. So obviously they'll have some gaps there. So if we are able to address the gaps irrespective of the size of the business, most of us are chasing the size of the business. I think that is a wrong strategy. So once you are getting in, and let's say for ease of understanding, we are saying one small module or one process is what you're going to address. And that is the best way to actually grow your business and eventually get into end-to-end. I'm actually facing this right now as we speak, right? The attempt was, eventually to replace a 10-year-old solution where there is a process owner. When you do that, there's going to be a backlash from the process owners. They build that sense of insecurity. So that is not going to take you anywhere. So I think you should always start small in these established enterprises and then grow your presence, eventually take over the entire end-to-end solution. And that's the only way. One reason is you
Maybe I'm gonna have to. Maybe
Yeah.
I think, but you covered a really important point there, but I'm gonna have to stop you there because we're running out of time, and I just want to jump straight to Vivin here because he also brings a very important point. And Vivin, one thing I want to ask you here, and we have discussed this sort of offline before. Can we leapfrog? I mean, we've seen how India has leapfrogged on certain fronts in the past when it comes to comms or in some sort of other even B2C spaces where, Europe and US went through larger incubation periods and then, maturity and so on, whereas we actually leapfrog. Can we do the same in contact? Do you see that possibility here? What are your views on that?
The short answer is yes, we can, right? Especially in certain areas. For example, if you look at the amount of BIM services work that's done in India, no other geography can replicate that. So a lot of our solutions are actually automating some of the BIM workflows. So when it comes to generative AI, when it comes to design automation, I think India has a unique opportunity in being able to leapfrog a lot of other solutions that exist in the space. That said, leapfrogging happens when there's actually other mature solutions that are there already at a certain level, right? The spaces where we've leapfrogged, for example, fintech or things like telecom and so on and so forth, other markets were already in generation 3 or 4, and we just went from 1 to 3 or 4 because there's something to aspire to, something to look to, and you automatically short-circuited the process, right? In construction tech, it's not clear yet on what the generation 3 or 4 looks like. So leapfrogging and getting to that stage is non-trivial. It's possible in certain areas like BIM because India has so much experience in this space, but it's not clear on the timeline for this. The good part is there's so much construction volume here and there's so much talent here. There's a lot of opportunity to experiment. There's a lot of opportunity to build new solutions. And AI is developing so quickly right now that the learning curves will be much, much faster. So I do see a possibility to leapfrog a lot of stuff that's happened. So the way we think about this trajectory, right? There's analog, there's digital, there's platforms, and then there's AI. So we don't need to go through all of these steps. We can directly start moving towards step 3 and step 4 without having to take that sequential approach. But we are still very early, right? The culture has to still adapt to all of this. And I think the top 1% will do the leapfrogging very easily from a customer adoption perspective. But why? It won't be like fintech or telecom as yet. Eventually, hopefully, that will happen, but it'll be a slower adoption curve than we'd seen in some of the places.
Thank you very much, Vivin. And Raghu, I want to go to you before I go to Kalyan and close the session. But ROI is also very important when it comes to this, and it's very tricky when it comes to, we've heard how nascent this market is. We haven't yet sort of this, how to say, blueprinted, templated solutions which bring very sort of, predictable ROI and it, the incubation time is higher. How do you sort of build a case internally and potentially externally in terms of building such sort of, or, taking in some solutions which haven't yet is proven ROI? What do you think about that?
Okay, that's a great question. I mean, this is one of the questions that we had talked about in the initial days of our early stages of our adoption. When we wanted to go digital, this was the first question that would come up. Everything that happens in any organization is, okay, now when I'm spending so much, what is the return on it? What is the benefit out of it? That question kept coming up again and again. So the first initial years, I would say at least 1.5 years, it took me to explain to the management and the system here that when you are trying to go for process enhancements, ROI is not very critical. It's not a barometer to measure the adoption of technologies which are very new. So the very first, so you cannot put dollar value to tangible or intangible benefits until and unless they're measurable, meaning no technology has been adopted for the life cycle of a project for us to see what are the benefits we have got. So before we receive anything, it's all hypothetical. Okay, if I adopt a certain digital tool, it's going to save me X amount of man hours. But in India, man hours is not a parameter for measuring your work output. So how do you put a dollar value to that? So we started. We spent a lot of time debating on this, and then finally we realized that question itself was becoming a bottleneck for us to start getting into digital space. So we just took a call and said, keep the ROI aside. Let us adopt the digital tools that we think are useful for us, and gradually, when the process enhancement happens, you will see the transformation of an organization from a traditional way of doing projects, to a more digitized way of projects. So we were hoping, and today I can say 5 years into this adoption, that has actually happened. I mean, ROI is not even a matter for us to look into any technology. We just identify technology. We know this is going to bring in benefits. It's going to improve the process. It's going to improve the collaboration. We just go for it. We don't sit down and calculate, okay, itne mein kitna paisa milega and all that. So that was a very crucial call that we took many years back, and that has benefited us for a deeper adoption of many technology, be it augmented, be it virtual reality, or 3D printing also as a technology to be used for our projects. So ROI for us was a question in the initial days, but today it is not a question that we look at or try to answer when we try to adopt a technology. Yeah.
So Raghu, that
Bhargav,
was such
Bhargav, if I can add a point to that. So
I was just gonna say that everyone here who's sort of gathered, whether it's the panel or the attendees, I'm sure are thinking that let's hope that all clients are like Raghu now. Basically, this is what we are thinking. Yes, Kalyan, please. Yeah.
No.
I'm going
What
to
I
be at your
was trying
doorstep,
to
Raghu.
say is that again, we have some very direct experience, Raghu, with one of our customers who, like you said, initially was kind enough, if you will, to not use ROI as a parameter for adopting the technology solutions. And after having used the technology for a few years, like I'm looking at 4 or 5 years, realized very unintended benefits that they could get with the historical data that they had now collected on the platform. They could look for other inefficiencies that they could not even have conceived without the data being present. So with that, and that started driving a continuous improvement on many different dimensions. So then finally they said, Kalyan, we're now able to deliver projects with a higher degree of reliability and much more confidence with which we're able to predict time and cost. And that alone, it became much beyond ROI, is kind of my point. So unintended consequences, positive consequences in this case, I'm saying but they needed that leap of faith to put the technology, to adopt it and use it for a few years before these unintended consequences came, right? So
True. Agree with you.
Look, I think we've had some really amazing sort of points discussed here, and thank you to the panel for that. We are actually running a bit late, so I'm gonna have to kind of ask Chaitanya if you can give me a hand. So are we gonna go to Q&A now and let the audience ask those questions? I see that they've already asked some questions which have been answered as well. So how are we doing this?
Yeah, I mean,
Vivin has been very active on responding to a lot of. Thanks, Vivin, for that.
Yes.
Yeah. So Bhargav, I did highlight a few questions again. If you want to ask any other panelists' opinion as well, so you can pick 1 or 2 questions. I think that's all the time that we might have. Again, whoever is here, if your questions doesn't get answered, please feel free to reach us out, and we can connect you with whoever you want to talk to, and that way you get your questions answered as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Aditya. I was going through questions, and since I'm the moderator, I'm going to be partial and not impartial. Sorry, I'm just because there is one question, and I'm going to throw it to Kalyan. Incorporating lean technology has proven benefits for large-scale construction projects, but how feasible it is for small to medium-sized construction firms is the question. And can lean methods be effectively adopted by them? Very quickly, Kalyan, please.
Yeah, I think I put in a small response there, but I will state it as well. So I think lean, Bhargav, you know this better than anybody else in this room, is a vast ocean, right? So you don't need to adopt all of lean to be seen as lean. So I think the point is, if you pick 1 or 2 use cases where you are not necessarily competing, but you're complementing existing things, and then that's a better way to drive the technology adoption. Point number 1. And point number 2 is that you should always assume that you'll be in what I call as a mixed mode of operation, right? Some processes will be lean, maybe some stakeholder will be lean, but the project is probably always going to have some mixed mode of lean plus non-lean. So you have to know how to coexist, but still sort of we discussed ROI, so we will still have to show that the technology is delivering value, right? I mean, we started with trying to say last planner, but that was too big, right? But there are maybe smaller pockets like digitization of like a quality or a safety or a 5S or something, which might be more isolated, relatively speaking, right? So.
Yeah, no, good answer. Good answer. And yes, I mean, it can be taken in. We're actually doing this as we speak in India, that medium organizations can take solutions like these. Small organizations, it may be a little bit hard, very small, I mean, but medium.
Very small,
it's
yes.
Very small is difficult. This one's for Vivin, maybe. I'm going to throw it to you, Vivin. Are we having multiple platforms solving different problem statements? You see this all the time as a VC. Point-based solution versus sort of a platform play. Like there is no platform that can handle complete operations. How do you balance? I mean, do you think the drive to digitalization is actually process standardization? And then what is it's a bit of a dichotomy here. So let you answer.
This debate comes up very often these days
I
because
bet.
the biggest GCs get badgered with so many solutions. There's one GC who came to me and said, I use 60 software. Right? It's like, it's just not manageable.
60, Vivin? Did you say
60? 60.
Wow. Okay.
And they're like, it's just not manageable. We can't really have logins and everything else that goes on. So they've moved to a standardization process where they culled it from 60 and they wanted to go to 25, right? There's still some specialized software they wanted to do. Oh, there's another GC is like, I'm not adding any more software unless I can take something out of my stack, right? So it's gotten to a phase where people are like, yes, it's difficult to manage. So I think the solution is somewhere in between, right? There's not one broad-based solution which can provide everything, but you need to, integrate with existing major platforms because there'll be a backbone. Every organization needs a backbone, whether it's Procore, Autodesk, Bentley, Trimble, whatever it is. And then it needs solutions which are catering to specific aspects, right? And which one is niche and which one is platform depends on how much value that solution is providing. For example, workforce management is very important to certain trades. Here, they're willing to have a specialized software because that's adding tangible value to what they're doing, right? Scheduling is sometimes important enough for people to add the specific solutions to. So you need to say, what is the level of value this is adding? Otherwise, if the likes of Procore brings a solution which is like 80% as good as the niche solution, they will likely go with that because it just is easier from an adoption and usage perspective. And it's kind of free because it's a feature on a larger platform. You don't really have to pay for it, right? So that is where it is landing. It's not going to be one or the other completely, but somewhere in between. But for startups, it's very important to make sure adoption is easy, right? Break down all the barriers when it comes to these players, and single sign-on integrations, things like that are important to think about.
Very much. I think that was very good answer. I'm going to throw this to Raghu. And again, please, very quickly, how far, and this is coming from a different angle, but still, because you're a client, you would understand this. How far any new government regulations or a nudge from a client like you or a collective set of clients would accelerate adoption of prop tech or Contech?
At least when it comes to AEC space or architectural space, I think our nudge from companies like us may not be that beneficial. The simple reason being, it matters more when companies like NNT or those companies start talking digital and try to push for policy changes. But for companies like us, we don't have a big say, I would feel. So.
Okay. I'll park one more question maybe later if we can, but that's a good answer. And VB, this one's for you. In construction, the procurement process is one of the most fragmented across all verticals. What's the biggest problem they face? This, and you probably answered a little bit as well.
Procuring the software or procuring. What is your question?
Yeah, I guess it's a two-phase question for you and for them. I think it's for both sides, I guess. What problem they face and what problem you face. Maybe you can answer both if you want.
I think the gap between the business owners or the process owners and the procurement. Procurement always looks at costs, right? Especially when you're talking of, let's say, an L1, you'll end up being an L1, L2, and L3. So they are not able to differentiate the solutions. So there's always a gap there. So but the process owners might probably prefer an L2 or an L3. So the challenge is there. One. Second is they don't look at the urgentness of the purchase. They kind of treat you like any other a software solution, like any other construction material. That is where is the issue.
Yeah, yeah, like an equipment provider or a material
Like an
provider.
equipment.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we kind of, I think, I mean, way over time now. I'll summarize the key points which came out of the panel, if in a couple of minutes, which we had a fantastic sort of a discussion on so many points. I had so many questions still lined up, but I just couldn't because we ran out of time. But I just want to kind of summarize very quickly. Almost everyone spoke about culture, and I think that really brings together the point that even though we sit in this sort of tech space, context space, culture is absolutely the crucial point we all need to address, and we need to really work on that collectively. The likes of Kalyan, partially us as well, we've been working in the background for many years in trying to kind of prep this industry. The same has been done. I talk about this quite a lot in sort of my sessions. Quite a lot of this has been done in the Western countries, in Europe, in sort of US and other places, through so many initiatives over a period of time. We are only just starting to do that. So this is a part which is very important, building that culture. And Kalyan again connected that to educating the market, which also means educating the education system itself, extending. So whatever you do, if you can extend this, if you can connect this with academia and then bring students on board, you're then sort of preparing the next generation in adopting not just your solution, maybe others as well, because they start to kind of have that mindset. So that again sort of is connected very deeply to the cultural aspect. This was also spoken about quite a bit, is integration and building an ecosystem. None of us we don't exist in silos. Even if we want to build a monopoly, we don't actually we're not silos. We have to integrate with other players, whether we like it or not, sometimes even competitors. We have to provide an integrated solution somewhat to the customer, otherwise we're going to lose out as an industry. So let's compete, but also don't forget that we can't punish the customer in the process. So that's also very important, that how are we actually differentiating between a point-based play to a platform play. So integration is the key. This came up quite a bit as well, that going to the largest players is not always a great idea, especially when you start accelerating the process. I think going to the mid-sized players, especially in India, is actually not a bad idea. And so that's sort of important to sort of remember. And then Vivin said, why are they using the product? Always remember that. And I actually like that part, because that's key. That's like, because we may have built the product with something in mind, but why are they using it? Are we asking that question? Hey, why are you using my product? So that may not be the same answer that you thought you're going to get. So, right. So, and then Raghu mentioned this sustainability, and that word was actually, missing until then. Very important. There is a tremendous drive on sustainability, and quite a lot of what we're doing actually contributes to that. So can we actually build that sort of connection in our pitch, not just to the investors, but also in terms of like how we're building the product and towards the industry. So think about that. One thing I thought like we would, but we don't have a clear answer yet. We've been said, that leapfrogging is possible, but the path to that is not clear yet. And I think if we work together again, maybe through these sort of platforms, maybe we can come together and build that path a little bit more clearly in the next sort of 2 to 5 years. That'll be very, very good actually, because it'll help the ecosystem. And finally, again, I'm closing this with sort of the idea about, again, maybe culture a little bit, but also supply chain. Raghu and we both sort of spoke about this procurement supply chain, but supply chain is really key. Educating the supply chain, it's not just the main sort of tier ones and tier twos, it's the entire supply chain that needs to be educated. I've been associated with some of those initiatives in the West, in the UK with Highways England and some of the other players, where they set on this path since 2007, 2008. They haven't yet ended. I mean, it's an ongoing journey, educating your supply chain, training them about all these things. It doesn't end. And so you can't just think that we have a 5-year mission and we're done. And so I just want to close with that, because it's quite a lot of these things about education, about culture, about this sort of supply chain management, and all those sort of things will continue for a very sort of long period of time, and we need to be prepared for that. And that will hopefully then accelerate our journey towards the adoption. So hopefully we sort of brought enough knowledge to the table to actually make it useful and worth your time. So thanks everyone for joining us, and once again, thanks CTrIBE, thanks Chaitanya and Aditya for making this happen. Amazing sort of panel, and thanks to all the panelists, for sort of giving your time on this day. And finally, of course, happy Independence Day to everyone. So from my side, but thanks everyone.